Hi, my name is Jillian Olson, and I'm the Young Professionals Director for the Washington Policy Center. And today we have a very dear friend and guest, Peter Finn. Peter sits on our advisory board for the Young Professionals and is a local business owner in the area. So, Peter, welcome.
Thank you, Jill. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So, Peter, we just want to know who you are. We want to kind of start with that and go from there.
Absolutely. Well, I'm a Christian husband, father of 5 children, and as you mentioned, a small business owner. I have an investment company, Finn Wealth Management, based in Spokane. I've got an office on North Division with a sign on the road featured prominently there. And I've been in the financial industry for about 11 years now, a self-employed business owner for 4 of those years.
What led you to wanting to be a business owner?
Well, I got my start at Merrill Lynch,
Mhm.
obviously big box company, huge, well-known brand, and I spent 3 years as an assistant there, 4 years as a financial advisor. I did really well. I made it into the top 2% of the company for my cohort of financial advisors. And when the pandemic happened and things got really crazy, companies were locking things down, Merrill Lynch got, we'll say, overly enthusiastic about that. And I decided for those reasons, as well as for becoming more of a Dave Ramsey guy, where I didn't want to be pushing debt on people, that Merrill Lynch wasn't a good fit for me anymore.
Mhm.
So I interviewed with 7 different companies on Wall Street, Morgan Stanley, UBS, various others. And what I found was that all of them were moving in the same direction, which is that they wanted to
Wow.
not just be in the investment business, but they wanted to be in the banking business. So the idea would be that if you were my client and I were managing your wealth, they would be incentivizing me to sell banking products, might be bank accounts, might be credit cards, might be car loans, whatever. And that I would get paid based on what percentage of those types of financial products that aren't related to wealth management my clients decided to take on. So I decided at that point that I should look at starting my own
Wow.
investment company. And that was pretty daunting, but when I looked into it, I found that was going to be the best way to serve the people that I wanted to serve. My clients looking out for their best interest, working as a fiduciary, and not feeling pressured to ever sell any kind of loans or things that I didn't think were a good fit for them. Right. And that's what I've been doing now for 4 years. And there were a lot of challenges starting out, but what I found is that my stress level is lower, things are better for the clients, things are better for my family. I actually have a better toolkit to serve those people than I would have if I'd stayed at Merrill Lynch, and I'm very happy with the decision that I made.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, you seem to take to it really well, only being in
Well,
it
thank
for
you.
4 years. So we hear a lot about you in the community. So, how did owning a business change the way you see government or economic policy? I know you touched on it a
Mhm.
little bit, but did it change even more when you became a business owner, or is it
Yes.
just what led you to that?
Yeah, definitely. I think the most profound change that I've had, at least in terms of how I view the government, is understanding that freedom fundamentally is about the ability to make decisions.
Hmm.
So I had to decide when I launched my own business, for example, what fees am I going to charge, right? What financial planning tools am I going to use? Am I going to do financial planning at all? Am I going to use mutual funds? Am I going to use ETFs? Am I going to use stocks and bonds? How am I going to pick these things, right? And a lot of these decisions had been made for me without me even really thinking about it at
Oh,
Merrill Lynch.
wow.
And so when I launched my own business, I realized, okay, well, I have to decide all of this. And one of the first things I ran into was when I was thinking about what fees to charge. I needed to figure out how to come up with a fee schedule that would incentivize me to serve all the clients I wanted to serve because I didn't want to just be serving millionaires, which is kind of what Merrill Lynch focuses on. I wanted to be able to help people who
Mhm.
are millennials and Zoomers who are on a good track but don't have a lot of wealth yet. And I set a fee schedule that started at 3% and then went down as people's assets grew. And what I ran into was that the state regulator in Washington told me, well, 2% is the statutory cap. So you're just not allowed to charge anyone more than 2%. And that was really the first time that I realized, well, like this is just an infringement upon my ability to make decisions. And you might say, well, maybe no one should ever pay that kind of fee, but the reality is I was wanting to try to serve people who had as little as say $20,000, right,
Yeah.
to invest. And I wanted to make that worth my time. So the idea was that they would pay 3% up to 25,000, and then it would drop to 2.75, and it would go down in like $25,000 increments. But I was barred by law from doing that, and so I had to choose the 2% starting point instead. And then it still goes down as asset levels go up, right? But that's what really changed for me, was understanding that this is all about the freedom to choose, the freedom to choose what fees we charge, the freedom for you as a potential client to choose me or one of my competitors, right?
Exactly.
Rather than being in a marketplace where the government is setting all of the standards and all of the rules, and then you as a consumer, like if you were, for example, coming to me with $20,000 to invest, you would be in a situation where potentially there wouldn't be any financial advisors who were able to serve you in the way you wanted, because the government is setting a limit on what they can charge that ends up infringing on your ability to choose as a consumer. So that was the big change for me when I actually launched my own business.
Well, and it makes sense that it really sounds like a controlled economic system as opposed to the free market system
Right.
that we're based off of here in
Mm-hmm.
obviously Washington and America.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really limiting for
Right.
us as the consumers as well. Because if I thought 3% was too much, I could just choose to go somewhere else.
Right.
So
And similar to like the minimum wage, for example, where someone will say, well, no one should get paid less than $7.50 an hour. You can run sort of a hypothetical model in your head, and you can ask, well, okay, let's say that there was an employer who offered to pay you 1 cent per hour.
hmm,
Do you think anyone would take up that job?
no.
Right. No. They would say, no, I'm not going to work for 1 penny an hour, right? There
No.
is, and similar with the fee rates with my business, right? If I were to set my fee rate at 100%, and you opened your account with me, and then I took 100% of it as a fee, right? That would be a no-go for you,
It
right?
would.
There is a number at which you, the client, are satisfied, and I, the financial advisor, am satisfied. And
Wow.
it really hit me when I was going through actually setting all of this up that it's really important for us to be able to have that conversation, to have it be transparent, and to have laws in place to make sure that the fee that we agree to is what you're charged and all of that stuff. But like leaving it to you as the consumer to decide what it is you're willing to pay, and leaving it to me, the financial advisor, to decide how much I'm willing to actually work for, right? And letting us set that, what we would call a market equilibrium, together, rather than some bureaucrat in Olympia or Washington, D.C., trying to make that decision for us, often with good intentions, but creating a situation where you end up just not having a financial advisor, right? And I end up not having a client.
No, that makes perfect sense, and definitely something we would want to push back on.
Right.
So, when you hear the term, speaking of free markets,
Mhm.
what does it mean based on your real world experience when you hear free market?
Yeah, I would reiterate, it's the freedom to choose. It's the freedom to make choices. That ultimately is what it boils down to. Who decides how much you're going to pay for a service that you want? Who decides how much a service is going to be offered at for the person who's providing it, right? That is the absolute core of it. And I think that when you distill it down and you understand that it's all about the freedom of people to make choices, this idea of the government setting all of these terms in place of you doesn't feel so warm and cozy as it does when the flowery language is attached to it, right? And it's like, well, we're protecting people from harm, and we're making sure that people make good decisions and all of that stuff. In the end, all you're doing is infringing on people's freedom to make their own decisions.
Yeah, what is the quote where it's if you trade, um, like safety for security, and I kind of butchering it, but basically you lose both. You lose your
Right.
freedom for security, you lose both.
Right.
So that's kind of what I'm hearing you say, and it
Mhm.
reminds me of a story of a woman whose mom was from Vietnam, and she went back there on a journey. She said there were miles and miles of all these different little booths with all the same product, all at the same price, and there was no way to differentiate who you should purchase from. And that
Exactly.
was the controlled economic system.
Yes. And I think, just to segue off a little bit into the woods, it's also about the problem of unintended consequences. So the idea behind government policies that are well intentioned is that, well, they're going to come in and they're going to keep someone from getting gouged, or they're going to keep someone from having to pay more than maybe they would have if they had done a better job negotiating for themselves, or whatever it might be. But in the end, there's no way to create a system where bad things never happen. and that everything's great all the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you take away one potential negative outcome, you're opening up through controls, right? You're opening up the possibility of other negative outcomes. So that's why I use the example with you and I of like you not being able to get a financial advisor, me not being able to get a client. That wasn't the intention of the regulator, but that is the end result.
That makes such sense. And I think too, we're seeing more of those unintended consequences with how fast I'm personally seeing Washington state government moving.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be a lot slower process. There was a
Right.
reason to go through the checks and balances, but we're seeing bills and laws, maybe many, well intentioned, but being pushed through at such a rate we can't really analyze what the consequences of those bills could be. So, if you could change one policy tomorrow to better support entrepreneurs and economic opportunity, what would it be and why?
On a federal level, it would be the self-employment tax. So as a small business owner, as someone who's self-employed, I have to pay a 15.3% flat tax on top of my ordinary income taxes. And this is supposed to be for Social Security and Medicare. Um, and the issue is when you are working as a W-2 employee, your employer pays half of that, and then half of it's supposed to come out of your paycheck. But when you're self-employed, you have to pay all of it. And
Wow.
so it creates this situation where instead of having, say, a 12% or 22% marginal tax rate, I have, instead of that, I have a like 27.5% um, or a 37.5% marginal tax rate. And so it makes it disincentivizes people from starting their own businesses and um, going out on their own instead of becoming employees, because then you have to not only pay more in taxes, but you also have to deal with things like paying the quarterly taxes on that and having potentially negative surprises when you do your taxes. And for someone
Mm,
like me, this is not a big deal, right? I'm a financial advisor. So for me, this stuff is like pretty pretty obvious and simple, but there are tons of people out there who are working in more technical fields, who are doing construction, who start a business of some other kind. Maybe they're a wedding planner, whatever. Numbers aren't their thing,
mm-hmm.
taxes aren't their thing, finances aren't their thing. And so they get slammed with this. And a lot of people get scared away from the business world and go back to the comfort and
Okay.
safety of being a W-2 employee at a corporation because of that. So on the federal level, that would be the main thing. In Washington state, we could get more granular, but I would say if there were just one thing, it would be the Washington state BNI, which is a gross revenue tax on businesses. So the idea is that I, as a business owner, if I, just making up numbers, have $100,000 in revenue, I then have $40,000 in expenses, meaning I make $60,000,
Yeah.
right? Well, Washington state levels a revenue tax on my business. So even if I made 100,000 in revenue and paid 40,000 in expenses and actually only took home 60, I'm taxed on 100,
Oh,
right?
wow.
And it's not a big deal if you're a smaller business. They give you some credits to avoid having you pay that tax at lower levels. But if I had, say, $10 million in revenue, I would be paying taxes on $10 million in revenue,
Mm,
regardless of whether 8 million of that went toward paying employees and inventory and all of that. I would be paying taxes on $10 million, even if my business only made 1 or 2 million in profit. So that would be one thing I would get rid of.
okay. No, that's a good one. I hadn't realized that they were charging that
Yeah.
over the top. So, why do you feel it's important for young professionals to engage in policy now? And what is at risk if they don't?
Well, I think for young people, it's easy to look at the field in politics or in public policy and say, I don't have a lot of power here. I don't have a lot of influence here. There are all of these people who are older and have a lot more money than me who are making these big decisions. But I think it's important to remember that those people used to be in your
Mm-hmm.
position, right? They used to have not a lot of money. They didn't have a lot of influence. They had to work on building that over time. It's usually, I mean, every once in a while you get someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger in California where he comes in and he's like, I've never run for anything and I'm going to be governor now, right?
Uh-huh.
I guess I should have done that in an Arnold accent, but I'll spare everyone that. That
Uh-uh.
is unusual, though.
Uh-huh.
Usually, people start political careers and they start working in public policy early on, and then their power in the system compounds over time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's important to get started on that now, keeping in mind that in the future, through your work that you're doing now, you will have a lot more power and influence to change things. On the flip side, remember too that those people who have power and influence now are going to age out and die,
Yeah.
right? So if you're looking at the person who's the governor now, 25 years from now, that person certainly won't be governor. They might not even be on this earth anymore, right? So you shouldn't get discouraged by your age and your limited resources into thinking that you just shouldn't play a part. Instead, you should focus on playing the part you can right now and getting yourself in a position where 10, 20, 30 years from now, you actually have a great deal of influence. And the risk to you, if you don't do that, the second part of your question, is that other people who don't share your interests or maybe aren't as thoughtful as you will do that,
Yeah.
and then they will have the power in 20 or 30 years, and you'll still be just as powerless 30 years from now as you are today because you didn't get started right away.
And I've noticed it's just small steps. It's joining, like for me, coming to Washington from Texas,
Mm-hmm.
it actually was finding the Washington Policy Center as a resource and attending an event. And then from there, meeting someone who invited me to another event on policy and kind of taking it in those bite sized chunks
Mm-hmm.
of being able to say, oh, I can focus on this one thing,
Yeah.
I can understand this policy better. I know you being a former school board member,
Mm-hmm.
also, that is such a powerful statement to that local, intimate, close piece of government
Mm-hmm.
that you held that, and you're a young
Mm-hmm.
professional,
Yep.
so you were able to influence that and make some positive change in your community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's easy to feel sometimes like when you're young, people are going to look at you and think that you don't know what you're talking about. But a lot of times, people are very dissatisfied with the people who are in power making decisions, and they're just looking for someone with a different perspective, and they view you being younger uh, as a sign that you're going to be more likely to do things differently than the people in control now.
I love it. Well, Peter, thank you for your time today. Do you have any final thoughts?
I would just say on that last point that I think WPC is the best organization in the state of Washington right now if you want to get that start on influencing public policy and working your way into the political arena, whether it's to be an elected official in the future or if you want to influence things some other way. WPC is the best place to do that for Democrats and Republicans who want to live in a freer, more fair society.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for your time.
Thanks
All
for
right.
having me here, Jill. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.